I think overall this evening we heard a mixture of both opportunities and some real risks, which the government, in putting forward its response to the consultation and in putting forward legislation and moving this into an implementation phase, will have to address. I think there are ways that those concerns can be addressed, but it needs more work.
Anna, the King's Fund, in its response to the White Paper, said that it felt that the changes were too far, too fast. Now, Andrew Lansley has said in response that the changes are ambitious but not unachievable. What's your response to that?
Well, I think in our response we made it clear that this was an ambitious set of reforms, but we were concerned that at this particular time, when the NHS is facing one of its toughest financial environment, that it maybe wasn't the time for such radical restructuring, particularly abolishing organisations such as primary care trusts, who have up until now played an important role at that local level at managing money and ensuring that changes that need to happen across the system are done in the interests of patients. And we're not confident that over the next few years, with the creation of GP consortia, that they'll be able to get up to speed quickly enough to take on these new responsibilities.
If Mr Lansley is suggesting that it is achievable, what chance do you think you have of changing his mind?
We think that there are organisations, GP groups, who are ready, and we've heard about some of those this evening in Cambridgeshire and other places where GPs have been working closely with their primary care trust to take on financial responsibility, to take on budgets, and to really get involved in redesigning services locally in the best interests of patients, and they should be allowed to do so. But there are going to be parts of the country where GP practices and GPs are not going to be ready to take this on. We'll need a lot more support. Indeed, the first step is for them to get on top of being providers of primary medical services, and there needs to be investment in developing those organisations first before they start and take on commissioning responsibilities.
We heard a lot of fears tonight about the possibility that this really won't deliver change. I mean, how likely do you think it is that it will deliver the sort of changes that Mr Lansley and the government want?
Well, in our own audit of the NHS, which we published just before the election, clearly the amount of investment the NHS has enjoyed means that services are improving, and there's been a lot of evidence to suggest that services, both in terms of patient feedback and some of the emerging outcome data, do suggest that things are improving. And so there needs to be really clear, how is this going to deliver improvements in quality and in value for money? And I think whilst it's great to say get clinicians involved, and it's great to say put patients at the centre of services, give them more choice and control, we're not clear that the organisational changes won't act as a real distraction from those two important things, getting clinicians engaged and putting patients at the centre. So unless that can deliver those things, I think there is a real risk that the improvements we've seen won't continue.
And we've heard a lot about disintegration and the importance of local authority services integrating with NHS facilities, for example. How likely do you think this is to happen?
Well, the forthcoming spending review, we expect to be making announcements about some quite significant cuts for local authorities in the amount of funding available, particularly those local authorities that rely on central government grants. And that will have a knock-on effect in terms of social care provision, and that in turn will have a knock-on effect for the NHS, particularly around the care of older people, and particularly around whether they can be adequately cared for and discharged from hospital in a timely way. So the future looks, I think, quite bleak, and more than ever there's a need for the local authorities to work closely with the NHS. But again, it's not clear how with GP consortia, particularly if they're not covering the same geographical boundaries as local authorities, whether that sort of pooling of money, that close working together will happen in the way that I think the government, of course, hope it will. but it's not clear that local authorities and GP consortia can work in the way that perhaps we've started to see emerge between PCTs and local authorities, where they share boundaries and share populations.
The meeting heard the importance of involving the private sector a lot more. How likely do you think that is to happen?
Well, I think there will be opportunities, particularly where innovative services can demonstrate that they can offer real value for money and bring a very different model of care. And there is already third sector providers, also from the not-for-profit sector, who want to come into the market and offer those types of services. I think there is no more money though, so we heard this evening that in order to give those opportunities to new providers, it will mean taking away from existing providers. So the only way that we can manage it is for current services and current providers of services to shrink. And at the end of the day, that will mean closing services, closing wards within hospitals, and in some places closing hospitals altogether.
And you believe that will happen?
I believe it has to happen, and it would be good if it could happen in a more planned way, in that I think that consortia in future, together with local providers, need to look at what their plans are for investing in other care and plan closures of hospitals. If it happens gradually, money seeping away from hospitals, they will not be able to respond to that in a way that maintains patient care.